If you would, take your seats, please. We will have lunch after Mrs. Howe. Linda Moulton Howe is an Emmy award-winning TV producer, documentary filmmaker, investigative journalist, and reporter and editor of the award-winning Science, Environment, and the Real X-Files. The news website is earthfiles.com. Linda also produces 3 hours of her news investigations each month for the American iHeart Premier Radio Network's Coast to Coast AM, distributed throughout North America. She does weekly broadcasts of the 2-hour live phenomenon radio, in which she hosts with U.S. Air Force Tech Sergeant John Burroughs, who's now retired. And Linda is the author of 4 books: Alien Harvest, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness, Mysterious Lights, and Crop Circles. Linda is also the producer, director, and writer, editor, reporter of documentaries related to high strangeness phenomena, A Strange Harvest. So now, Linda Moulton Howe.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad that we all were able to be in Bastrop. In fact, in spite of global warming and increasing weather system strength. And I want to both thank and congratulate Joran Van Straten and Robert Dupper and Daniel List and all who have brought together this 2015 Secret Space Program Conference. This is a time when many feel the world is getting close to that big breaking news that we're not alone in this universe and never have been. And this morning, I think that we had a taste of some of the underbelly about why there have been so many forces working so hard for so long to keep us from the facts and the truth. But as I share this morning with you, it is my firm conviction, and it has been since I began animal mutilation investigations in 1979 at the CBS station in Denver, that's 36 years ago, that it is only in knowledge and information that we have strength, that if we are in systems and in governments that operate and rule by secrecy and policies of denial, we are all weakened and we are made vulnerable. And that what we are experiencing this morning is perhaps an insight into why forces have tried to keep us dumb and blind, and why there are other forces that seem to be pushing us now at a rate and a speed that I have never experienced in my professional life toward a breaking open that the truth of this concocted planet, and it is a concocted planet, needs to be shared with the entire world. Thank you. 68 years ago, a variation on a headline about "We're Not Alone in the Universe" made the front page of the Roswell Daily Record on July 8, 1947 as, quote, "Roswell Army Airfield captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. No details of flying disc are revealed." We now know that Colonel William Blanchard, commanding officer of the 509th Bomb Wing at the Roswell Army Airfield, ordered his public information officer, Walter Hott, to issue a press release that one of those UFOs that everyone was seeing in 1947 had crashed during a thunderstorm northwest of Roswell near Corona. Strange debris had been found by a sheep rancher, Mac Brazel, on July 2nd. But within hours of that news, Commanding General of the 8th Air Force, Brigadier General Roger Ramey, along with his Chief of Staff, Colonel Thomas DuBose, held a press conference in Fort Worth, Texas. The two men spread pieces of a shredded weather balloon around them to say there had been no crash disk in New Mexico, that what came down on that ranch near Corona was only a weather balloon. General Ramey didn't mention that Roswell radar film and tower logs showed, quote, the merging of 3 radar targets prior to collision and subsequent crashes, close quote. Bob and Ryan Wood and a few of us began studying leaked documents with that sentence in it about 15 years ago. The 3 sites, here is the one you've heard the most about that was between Roswell and Corona. Our government called it Landing Zone 1. The choice of the word landing is quite interesting historically. Landing Zone 2 was at the Trinity site where we had the first atomic bomb test in July of 1945, 2 years before these 3 vehicles came down. The third, referred to as Landing Zone 3, 30 miles east of Alamogordo on the Mescalero Indian Reservation. And the crashed vehicles were not round discs. The government's own historic documents, such as this first annual report of the Majestic 12 project, shows this was a review of President Truman's special panel to investigate the capture of unidentified plan form. That is a word that you find in FDR administration and Truman administration documents about what the public was calling UFO. They called unidentified plan form space vehicles by US armed forces and agencies, and plan form means a delta triangular shape. General Ramey's goal was to cover up the truth about an alien presence that deeply concerned President Harry Truman, who wanted it all kept secret from the public and the media. And since then, many different military and intelligence whistleblowers over the years have leaked firsthand information about non-humans interacting with the Earth. One of those military whistleblowers even did an important book in 1997 called The Day After Roswell, about what he knew firsthand of UFO extraterrestrial technologies and ETs while working in the Pentagon. Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso worked as chief of the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Desk for General Arthur Trudeau, who was handpicked by President Dwight Eisenhower in 1958 to be Director of Army Research and Development in the Pentagon. And General Trudeau handpicked Colonel Corso after their trusted days together in World War II. Colonel Corso told me he met with General Trudeau in his Pentagon office, where the general handed over extraterrestrial artifacts retrieved from crashed or landed UFOs. And I will never forget how almost comical it was for Lieutenant Colonel Corso to tell me that in his first meeting with General Trudeau, who he knew from Italy in World War II, and now General Trudeau has been handpicked by President Eisenhower because they trusted each other, and Trudeau walks over to a file cabinet, opens up a drawer, asks Colonel Corso to come and take a look, and here were various ones of the extraterrestrial artifacts that he lists in his book on a page that included what he said looked like horsehair that they would later learn was like what we would use in fiber optics, and the poker chips, as he called them, that under a microscope had the very thin neighborhood grids of wire that they began to understand were related to what we would call today in the semiconductor industry. And that General Trudeau said that he had very specific, highly classified connections in a variety of companies, and that what General Trudeau wanted Philip Corso to do was to hand carry to an individual that would be in Boeing or Arco or wherever it was, and General Trudeau himself would have paved the way. Everything would be off the record, off the books, but inside the corporation they were going to back engineer ET technology to apply to defense and eventually to try to apply to what they would call civilian application. And they would do all of this under the strictest national security priority without anyone in Congress or the Supreme Court or tax-paying American public. No one else would know anything. Trudeau and Corso were the beginning of the United States' serious efforts to develop a secret space program that would use retrieved extraterrestrial technology for advancement. Meanwhile, NASA, under CIA control, would be the public camouflage for what was behind the scenes, a dark and growing underbelly of America spending trillions of secret dollars, but unknown and untouchable by the white world of Congress, the Supreme Court, and the American taxpayers. 50 years after the Roswell crash, disc headlines were seen and heard around the world. I was in Roswell to speak on the 50th anniversary of the July 1947 UFO crashes, which made the cover of Time magazine and media around the world. There I met and talked with Colonel Corso about his work for General Trudeau. And when Colonel Corso was introduced to me, he extended his hand to shake mine and he said, "Linda, how the hell did you get so much classified information?" Close quote. First words out of his mouth to me. And what he meant, the animal mutilations that I had investigated for my TV documentary, A Strange Harvest, that was first broadcast May 28, 1980 on Denver's CBS station, KMGH-TV, where I was director of special projects. That's when sheriffs and ranchers told me the perpetrators of the bloodless, trackless animal deaths were, quote, creatures from outer space, close quote. I heard that in September of '79. Ranchers had seen glowing lights in a night sky emit a beam down into the pastures. A few had even seen an animal lifted up in a beam or lowered to pastures, dead and mutilated. But none of those eyewitnesses would stand in front of my TV camera for fear of ridicule. Before he died, Colonel Corso talked to me in private about the highly classified documents he had read in Washington, D.C., dated as early as 1951 about animals found in several parts of the world with bloodless excisions and no tracks around them. But you and the public would never hear about it until the horse found skinned of all flesh from the neck up in September of 1967 in the San Luis Valley of southern Colorado. The government knew all about it from '51 on. Colonel Corso said the classified reports he read specified that the perpetrators of animal mutilations were, quote, extraterrestrial biological entities, close quote. But why? This illustration is by a Missouri horse rancher in 1975 who saw this glowing being at his gate during a time when he found several newborn foals and young horses bloodlessly mutilated in his pasture. Eventually, our government would realize that many of the UFO so-called pilots and other non-human entities were cloned androids or human ET hybrids produced from genetic harvests of Earth life, including animal mutilations and sperm and egg extractions in the human abduction syndrome. Our government, according to Colonel Corso, learned that in spite of the mutilations and abductions, some ETs are friendly, and they want humanity to advance faster to be more protected from very unfriendly ETs. So there was urgency in General Trudeau's goal to get alien technologies back engineered and patented as fast as possible to keep them out of the hands of our perceived human enemies and to support a secret space program that might have to battle in real Star Wars. Colonel Corso wrote about the secret ET technology transfer to American corporations for back engineering and patents, quote, General Trudeau also had relationships with the Army contractors who were developing new weapon systems for the military within one part of the company, while another part of the company was harvesting some of the same ET technology for consumer product development. These were companies such as Bell Labs, IBM, Monsanto, Dow, RCA that became General Electric, and the aviation and medical companies of Howard Hughes, close quote. At that July 1997 50th anniversary conference, Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. handed me this replica that he had made of the thin I-beam he remembered holding in the first week of July 1947. That's when his father, Jesse Marcel Sr., the head of intelligence at the Roswell Army Airfield, woke up Jesse and his mother to show them strange silver foil and I-beams that Jesse Marcel Sr. had picked up at a UFO crash site between Roswell and Corona, government document that would be Landing Zone 1. Jesse Marcel Sr. said the metallic foil was like cloth that could be folded or crumpled up, but would always return to its original flat, unwrinkled shape. Jesse Jr. told me his father said the debris, quote, was not of this earth, close quote. So, not the phony weather balloon story that General Ramey concocted on July 8th. Young Jesse Marcel was most curious about what he described as metallic pinkish purple hieroglyphs or symbols that ran along the entire length of a dark tan-colored I-beam only 3/8 of an inch wide. The I-beam was so lightweight that Jesse Jr. said he could hardly feel it in his hand, resting. It was like holding air. Plastics did not exist publicly in 1947. But later on, eyewitnesses would say the I-beams were similar to lightweight plastic or balsa wood. There were rumors that scientists had discovered the I-beams were an exotic hybrid of something like metal and something like wood blended together. It could not be cut or burned. Intelligence officer Jesse Marcel Sr. would himself compare the strange pink-purple symbols to, quote, indecipherable Chinese writing, close quote. Now we know that 12 years after the Roswell UFO cover-up began, that Brigadier General Stephen Lufkin was briefed at the Pentagon in 1959 about the Roswell UFO crashes and was shown thin I-beams with what he called purplish, quote, encryptions, close quote. Well, an encryption, that means encoding messages or information in such a way that only authorized parties can read it. Another source, Steve Lytle, reported that his mathematician father was asked by government authorities to, quote, decipher the I-beam symbols, close quote. They tried, but no one was able to. And those were not the only mysterious symbols to show up on UFOs. In 1803, on the east coast of Japan in the Hitachi province, now known as Ibaraki, fishermen reported that a pale, red-headed, alien-looking woman suddenly emerged from underneath the ocean waters in a round craft that had symbols on it, and people wrote them down. The woman was inside the craft, clutching a box. Utsuro Bune means ship hole because her sea craft was shaped like a rice bowl. People who saw the craft said the top was like glass or crystal. When the red-haired woman spoke, it was in a language that no Japanese person had ever heard before. What language was she speaking? Where did she come from? What was in the box? Nobody ever learned. And what makes things even weirder is that back in 1803, the same woman, the same description, the same craft were reported to have been seen in other parts of Japan, and she was always still tightly holding the box. 177 years later, on December 26, 1980, after midnight, Staff Sergeant James Penniston at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge in England would also encounter a strange craft with symbols, not on water, but in Rendlesham Forest. When Jim dragged his fingers over the symbols, his mind was filled with zeros and ones. Zeros and ones, binary code. And he had telepathic impressions simultaneously with the zeros and ones coming into his mind that this was a time machine from a distant future where an advanced civilization was dying out. Its mission was to harvest genetic material from Earth to use as, quote, band-aids, close quote, to extend the future civilization survival. There was no pilot. The triangular craft operated with alien self-activating software. Here is a comparison of two of the bune. Here is what was written down, interpretation of her craft. Here is a triangle with one circle here, a little larger to show there. So I'm marking here to here. Here is the second with the two circles up here. Utsurobuni, 1830. Rendlesham Forest, Jim Penniston, December 26th, 1980. And we're going to see the triangle circle symbol again in a current 2015 case. But before then, here is a comparison also of what happened in August 28, 1991, 11 years after Sergeant Penniston touched the symbols on the alien craft in Rendlesham Forest. Soviet authorities were tracking a UFO on a zigzag course over the Aral Sea at 4,225 miles an hour, 6,800 kilometers an hour. The rapid radar track vanished over Kyrgyzstan. A year later, in June 1992, it took that long for a search party to get to and find a cylinder-shaped craft with strange green symbols on its surface. The investigators reported, quote, a powerful electromagnetic field emanating from the wreckage, close quote. All photographs and videotape recordings were overexposed, destroyed. The craft had crashed in the Shaitan Mazar Gorge, also known as the Devil's Grave, in the central Tian Shan Mountains of eastern Kyrgyzstan. And then 14 years after that, an Army sergeant with his wife, two young children, dog and a cat, began moving from Hunter Army Airfield to Fort Carson in Colorado Springs, planning to go through Atlanta. The husband, Sergeant C.J., and his wife were shocked when a bright white light in the sky suddenly came down toward their truck. The Army sergeant estimated that the disc hovering above their truck in Wadley, Georgia was 820 feet long. He was that precise, he said, because he did this for a living in the Army, estimating sizes, distinctions, and shapes on aerial vehicles in the sky. 820 feet wide, and that's nearly 3 football fields. That's big. And nearly 200 feet in from vertical to bottom. that there were bright white. He said he wasn't able to depict with white, so he did it with yellow. And he said, I didn't know how to do it. He said, my drawing's wrong, I admit it. He said, because what we were seeing in the sky, it looked like this, Linda. It was white, but there was space in here, the night sky. He said, I've never seen anything like it, and I still don't understand it. This is there, and this bright light is projecting, and it had motion to it, but it was not coming from the physical craft to his eyes. It was projected in the front and projected in the back, and he didn't understand, but he said, I just drew the pieces of what we were seeing, not understanding the projection. And he said you'd have to have a bigger piece of paper to show how far the strange pulsing light was front and back of this craft. And below the midline were 5 dark symbols. CJ's wife, who I have talked to for about an hour, she was very upset by all of this. She doesn't want to speak publicly at all, but it was very good to be able to hear both of them talk to me about their interactions. This is her interpretation with her husband helping her. Everybody sees things differently. But the thing that was striking, and you don't see it here in the projection, these are subtle colors. She said it looked the way sun shining on an oil slick, the way it will have that rainbow reflection. She said that is the way this appeared, like the oil slick rainbow reflection in sunlight, but it's dark night, and it had a dim glow to it. Now she saw this as round lights, and she was particularly almost mesmerized by these round lights. Her husband, on the other hand, he thought that they were more rectangle like this, and he thought they were inset with dimension from the surface. And remember, in his work in the Army, one of his jobs is to see things in the sky and be able to retell and sketch details. This shows why eyewitness testimony singularly is not very reliable, but between the two, we get even more rich details. Now, the appearance of this craft, according to CJ, the sergeant, when it was over, he looked at his digital watch on his wrist, and he recalls that it's had 1:29 a.m. He thinks that everything happening over the road was no more than 5 minutes. But he's the first to admit that time was so chopped up and so weird, and everything that happened that night was so strange. For those of you who are subscribers to earthfiles.com, my news website, you will have seen the 2 very in-depth parts that I have done on this case last week, and I did 2.5 hours on Coast on the 28th about this case, using the husband with his permission with electronically altered voice. It's extraordinary what is behind this case and how some of it actually resonates with the 2 speakers before me. But all I can do right now, because I'm telling an arc of a story, is to share with you that something with symbols in which, look at this symbol and look at this symbol, and now we're going. Here's Jim Peniston, December 26, 1980, June 29th, 2015. Jim has two circles on a ring, I'll call it, around a triangle. This has a ring, a triangle, and three. The orientation is very similar. Sergeant CJ and his wife were so confused about what happened and how their GPS could have diverted them to Wadley away from their Colorado Springs route via Atlanta, which would usually have only been a 4.5-hour drive from Savannah. They started out at approximately, he thinks, somewhere 6:30, 7:30, 8:30, that they never expected that they would be anywhere but Atlanta by midnight. But the night of this high strangeness UFO, they did not get to Atlanta until after sunup, around 7:30 in the morning on June 29th. And I have all of the receipts from where they left near Hunter Airfield all through the trip. I have all of the receipts getting to Colorado Springs, and you can track how strange this all is. And then the next night on June 30th at a Motel 6 in Kentucky, Sergeant CJ found himself waking up in their motel bathroom with, this is the back of the motel receipt. He has that in his left hand. In his right hand, he has his ballpoint pen. He becomes conscious with his hand on the paper, and he had written these squares and lines on the back of the motel receipt, very similar to the strange story of Jim Peniston, who had the experience in Rendlesham Forest on December 26, 1980 with John Burroughs and Ed Kavansak. And John Burroughs was completely and totally, as he said, like blinded by zeros and ones that held in the front of his mind's eye. And it took about 2 days, and he thought he was going crazy, and Jim Peniston finally sat down and wrote all the zeros and ones in the back of his notebook. And no one on the planet, including John Burroughs, ever knew until we were in production on an Ancient Aliens TV program. Jim, John, and I were in Phoenix with the production crew, and that was in October of 2010. And it was that night at the end of production that Jim said, "Did I ever show you the back of my notebook?" Now, I went to binary code translators that I have worked with and I trust. And the first to come back to me, some of you may know, he's really good on binary code, is Horace Drew in Australia. He's a geneticist by profession. The two other men, one a retired Navy captain. The third is a man who has had degrees in college and works in analysis in photos. They all three looked at those squares and ones. And what I'm going to do is, this was the first one, they all concur. There's no dispute with Horace Drew. Continuous protection of humanity, a latitude, longitude. 49 degrees, 27 minutes north, and 11 degrees, 5 minutes east. That is the latitude, longitude of Hohenberg, Germany, about 100 miles northeast of Nuremberg. When I encountered that on my own Google Earth search, knowing what I have been told about the role of the Nazis and their collaboration, or a subsect of them, going back way before Hitler and World War II, but a part of that same arc. And that Piena Mundi has played such an important extraterrestrial base role in terms of establishing some kind of a base of some of them interacting with the planet. And taking what I know about what was known to some people in the UK and the US government as far back as the early 1920s about Pienemundi, and coming up into what we all know as World War II, and what was the goal of Adolf Hitler. The goal of Adolf Hitler was to put a super race in charge of the planet and eliminate the Hebrews. That's what he wanted to do. And that what happened in World War II could have been writ large in our faces without our understanding that extraterrestrials have battled through human containers, minds, and souls in the name of political power and territory. But it's the humans that have been provoked into these battles by something else that is larger. Just keep that in mind. And what a strange irony, continuous protection of humanity. 100 miles northeast of Nuremberg, where the trials of the atrocities of World War II were carried out. Expose hidden knowledge to all citizens. I could not agree more. Advancement imperative for planetary survival. Beware of Orion 1350.3 and Z. This, we don't spell it with a U, RUTICULI, Zeta Reticuli. 39.1, there's a question mark on the binary 70. This is Horace Drew, PhD's comment. The two coded numbers, 1350.3 and 39.1, question mark 70, tell us the distance in light years from Earth to the Orion Nebula, which is 1,350 light years, or to the binary star system of Zeta Reticuli, which we don't spell it that way either. In the United States, we spell it RETICUL, two I's. It's a binary star system. Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2. How many are familiar with the Betty and Barney Hill case from 1961? Well, that's what her star map was. Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 was the source of the extraterrestrials that picked her and her husband up. So he said, sources of grays. Well, I can stand here with some confidence to tell you that from everything I know from whistleblowers, we think of Kleenex. When we say Kleenex, once upon a time it was a company and it had one source. And now Kleenex is a generic around the world. There might have been a source of a particular type of extraterrestrial biological entity that has a particular shaped head with particular eyes that uses black lenses to see in a bunch of frequencies and the so-called gray bodies. It does not mean that that is confined to one planet in one solar system. There has been a spreading through other solar systems. So to say a singular source no longer applies. This last sentence, avoid signal messages sent. This is what Horace Drew wrote. Avoid capture of signal by the grays. I think not. I think this is the warning that has come, interestingly enough, in crop formation since the early 1990s. Beware of deception has been the theme, and beware of sending and receiving signals. This year of 2015, a warning about SETI and Earth sending out signals when they don't know what is on the other end of what could receive those signals has come from Stephen Hawking, physicist, Elon Musk from Tesla, and Bill Gates from Microsoft. All three of them in the last year warning that we may be making a terrible mistake of trying to communicate out to a universe with signals that can be traced to Earth. Why did those three men start making such a warning now? This is the binary translation of Staff Sergeant Jim Peniston's zeros and ones written in his notebook back in December of 1980. And this was a translation by Dr. Horace Drew and astronomer Mike Reed, who worked with me on several very important projects, a brilliant man. What a huge loss. 2.5 years ago, he just dropped dead in his house. His wife, everybody were stunned. He was doing so much behind the scenes work. And she didn't, unfortunately, have an autopsy, but it was very strange, and it's a huge loss. He was involved with this translation. Exploration of humanity. Later on, this was resolved into the word origin, 8100. A latitude, longitude, just like the one we just looked at from Georgia, meaning in this next line, with the word continuous, for planetary advance, fourth coordinate. This has just been volunteered. Does that mean time? We call it the fourth dimension. Is there an effort to have us focus on time, timelines being used, continuous, more unclear, and the word before. Now, when you compare humanity, this is a slightly different, obviously it's a different latitude, longitude, but let's look at this in terms of what words are going to be similar and the structure of the communication. Humanity, a latitude, longitude here, the word continuous, planetary advance, continuous. Here is Georgia, continuous, humanity, latitude, longitude, advancement, planetary. There is a theme in these binary codes that even extend back to the one that I think some of you in this audience would know about, Crabwood, the year after 9/11, where it is an alien in the wheat that is holding a huge circle of binary code. And when that was translated, it was beware of deception, and it was it's the same thing, trying to help humanity. Time is running out, time is short, but help is on the way, or there's help trying to help us. These have been messages also in the crop formations. Here is the last section of the binary code from Jim Peniston. All of these were translated to Caracol, Belize, Sedona, Arizona, the Great Pyramid in Giza, Egypt, Nazca Lines in Peru, Taishan-Q, China, the portal at the Temple of Apollo in Natros, Greece. These strange 4 words, eyes of your eyes. Does this mean looking through some humans because there are ET human hybrids? What does this mean? Origin, this is controversial. This is the origin as published in this book with Peniston's. Okay, Peniston became sort of at war with me, with John, with others when we were working on a project, and he wouldn't allow these to be shared for a very long time. And then they finally got Peniston to sign off putting it in this book that Pope worked on. But this goes back to when we went to England for the 30th anniversary in December of 2010. We had privately this information that I'm showing you then. None of it had been made public. Peniston refused. But Horace Drew and the astronomers stressed with me that when you get a string of zeros and ones, unless somebody is giving you where to put the decimal points, you have to look at a tremendous number of alternatives. So arbitrarily, the Prometheus Productions doing Ancient Aliens, they chose this binary of 5209-1313 and said it was the mythical High Brazil out west of Ireland, allegedly some kind of an island that would only appear once every 7 years, and then people would try to get to it and they could never get to it, and then it would disappear and come back 7 years later. It's a very strange historic reference to this High Brazil. But that fit into the Ancient Aliens concept. It was the astronomer and Horace Drew, they thought that the decimal points should be 1.31, and they had a different number here, and that would have been absolutely where Town Hall is in the center of Woodbridge, Suffolk, England. And it made sense from the standpoint that if this is a time machine and it is here to do something, that it would have latitude and longitudes on the sphere of the Earth to which it was going for specific work. And that's why I have thought that the Town Hall latitude, longitude made perhaps more sense. None of us understand origin year 8100. Nobody knows, can understand what that means. Now, what happened in Rendlesham Forest was apparently of great interest to the Defense Intelligence Agency remote viewers working at Fort Meade, Maryland, next door to the National Security Agency in 1986. Lynn Buchanan worked in a DIA unit called DTS. Their goal was to research the potential to use psychic abilities to spy in a program called Stargate. That's one beyond Grill Flame that Jim Mars was talking about yesterday. So they have Grill Flame, these men, then they changed the name because they changed the mission. Please underline this in your mind. It became Stargate when the DIA decided that the remote viewers were so accurate they could use it to spy. On July 14, 1986, one of Lynn's assigned practice targets was, quote, it was given to him, it's on the document, Rendlesham Forest Incident, quote, close quote, at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge. That had occurred only 6 years before on December 28, 1980. I've known Lynn a long time, so has Jim. He knew nothing, literally nothing about RAF Bentwaters. This is a page approved for release 2008, August 8, 2000. CIA, all of these numbers, remote viewing session data. Remote viewer LB is Len Buchanan. Interviewer ED is Ed Dames. The date of this remote viewing, July 14, 1986. The time, 11:09 hours. That would have been in Fort Meade, Maryland on the East Coast. The site was the building that they were in. Here's the shiny NSA building here. And over here are the little barracks, and Jim showed those photos yesterday. That's where the remote viewers were, next to the big shiny NSA building. Controlled remote viewing. The working mode had to do with I should have all of this broken down, and I do at Earth Files. You can go through every number, letter at Earth Files. But it was where he was in a practice mode, and here is the essence of what he saw.
I got that the driver of this vehicle is not in the vehicle. He's somewhere else.
Like this object that you are remote viewing in Rendlesham Forest could be a drone that is not manned, but that the intelligence associated with this is somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's when I got AOL break. Oh, I'm viewing ATs. So move me back to the place with the yellow light. That's when I got an incubator. I definitely realized that this young person, whatever, was in the place of the yellow light and that it was an incubator. Putting my analyst hat on, I would tend to say from this one session that this craft was looking for an ideal place, and once it found it, that incubator would open up and provide a living space for whatever was in it.
And you mean that the incubator in the black glassy craft, which is the outside version we have from the Pennison drawing, it would then deposit the extraterrestrial life forms in the incubator in a site on this planet to grow into whatever those extraterrestrials are.
That would be the analysis of that one session, yes.
Now, you did other remote views on RAF Bentwaters later on.
I was tasked with finding the power source. In fact, I still didn't know really what the Bentwater thing was. I got the propulsion system was a very small, enclosed thing that didn't really hook up to the craft, but was in some way providing a field of energy around the craft. And it was in an enclosed container type thing. When I was told to mentally move into the container to find out what was going on, I was not able to do that.
And this is the black box that you encountered in that very first July 14th, 1986 remote viewing. You didn't know where you were at the time, and you didn't know what it was.
That was it, yeah. And this energy type box has come up in several other things, like Sacsayhuaman that has, I think, 100-ton stones.
Sacsayhuaman is in Cusco, Peru.
Yeah, and there was a tasking about how those were moved. I've heard a lot of people say those were moved by sound and all that, but that's not what I got in my remote viewing session. I got that there was some kind of an object that emitted energy that could surround something and make it to where you could just pick it up.
Right, it would neutralize gravity.
Yeah. I had a task one time of the Utsuo Bune, which was an ET that landed in northern Japan. In that case, this female-looking being came out of the ship. She carried this box with her, and she never let anybody have this box. And I think the box, whatever was in the box, was what made the ship move.
Time machines with incubators to seed planets, ETs manipulating genes to create hybrids and clones. The Truman administration's MJ-12 knew they were dealing with technologies that were, quote, eons ahead of us, close quote. But they wanted to retrieve and study as much as possible, and one of the most difficult parts to understand has been the alien self-activating software. That alien self-activating software has been described by one whistleblower as making various ET spacecraft, androids, and other technologies invisible to human eyes, like this naval ship fading into and out of visibility in an October 2015, this month, Northrop Grumman Facebook posting that provokes the question, is this back-engineered ET technology from the Lieutenant Colonel Corso and General Trudeau efforts from long ago. In addition to invisibility, the extraterrestrial technology is described as functioning with self-activating software that can neutralize gravity and project three-dimensional holograms as camouflage that human eyes and minds cannot detect in the Earth environment. The concept of self-activating machines programmed by very advanced non-human intelligences to neutralize gravity, render invisibility, and project holograms came into sharper focus for me in May of 2007. That's when a series of photographs of dragonfly-shaped, highly strange aerial craft began to emerge, beginning with this one taken on May 5th, 2007 in Lake Tahoe, California, by anonymous email to MUFON. And then the images were sent to me at earthfiles.com and the Coast to Coast AM websites. The next day, on May 6, 2007, the series of photos were taken by a man who called himself Chad. He said his location was in the Bakersfield region east of San Luis Obispo. The symbols along the underside of this tail are important, and I will get into them more deeply in a few minutes. Then 10 days later, on May 16, 2007, a man calling himself Rajman 1977 said he was with his family having lunch in Capitola, northwest of San Luis Obispo, when they saw this in the sky, and he took a series of photographs. On this map, these are all the areas where there were sightings reported between May and July of 2007. First, Lake Tahoe, Yosemite National Park, Kings Canyon National Park, Sequoia National Park, that are near, these are not sightings, but this is very close to, these bright pink outlines are the China Lake Naval Weapons Center. Bakersfield region where Chad was, the drone with the yellow flowers. Coming up here, east of San Jose is Castle Air Force Base at these center pink dots. Between Capitola here and Monterey in this area, these are two more pink dots that mark the United States Army's Fort Ord. Capitola, I'm getting myself, Capitola where Rajman was, and then near San Jose and Saratoga is the Big Basin Redwood State Park. All of that in about 8 weeks. And then, as I was reporting on Coast and Dreamland and other radio and constantly at earthfiles.com, I began to get reports from people who were sending me illustrations of what they had seen in Oregon, Arizona, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Ohio, going back as far as 1987 to 8 period in Louisiana at an Air Force show where the man who called me, and he's never allowed me to use his name and voice publicly because of his work currently, but he said, look, I've seen one of these machines and it was off limits in a hangar, and I only got in there because I was with people who had clearances. And he said, Linda, they had one of these things up on a pedestal in an engineering hangar. On June 5th, 2007, this photograph and these others were emailed from a Stephen F. Jane and Jenna, who said this aerial object was above them in Big Basin Redwood State Park when they were out doing a hike. That same day, June 5th, 2007, I received in the mail, hard mail, photographs, 12 of them. They were 12 glossy print photographs from a Ty Brannigan, who said that he took them from his bicycle with a group, also on June 5th, in the Big Basin Redwood State Park near Saratoga, California. Ty sent these photos with a 2-page typewritten letter that included descriptions of twice seeing these aerial objects, this thing, flicker in and out of invisibility to visibility to invisibility while rotating slowly clockwise and then counterclockwise randomly. It actually scared the bicyclers with him. And he became frustrated that he wasn't getting the camera out that was in his pack to tape because they were flickering in and out. So he got his camera, he says this in the letter, and he put the strap over his hand in case it came, and it did, and he snapped away these 12 shots before the strange aerial machine flickered out again to invisibility. The Dragonfly drone photographs were attacked by mostly anonymous sources on the web as CGI and Photoshop productions for an upcoming electronic game and/or movie, completely untrue, and supports my perception that modern counterintelligence now uses the phony CGI Photoshop cover-up in this digital age as they used weather balloons and swamp gas 68 years ago. In fact, Steve Winans from Kansas MUFON sent me a 14-page analysis about color fringing evidence in these Dragonfly drone photos. Color fringing occurs when a lens fails to focus all colors to the same convergence point. See how these are light going into the sky? He's got a rectangle there showing different planes of focus. This tree is in the focus plane, and this is not, and this is color fringing. He concluded the color fringing that is present in almost all of the images of the Dragonfly drones that people submitted to earthfiles.com, because he saw all the photos that I had in addition to these, including the 12 prints from Ty Brannigan in Big Basin mailed to Linda Moulton Howe, is a strong indication that these images were produced by a camera and not computer software. The simplest explanation is that these images are of an actual unknown object in the sky, close quote. I and others were intrigued by these boxes. And when I tried to go in, this is close, it's not very good because of the resolution, but it gives you the shapes of what's on these boxes. And they are similar to what's underneath the tail on the Chad and the Rajman. This is as close as Chad could get. He took this photo, hearing a strange, sort of slightly high-pitched hum when he got close enough, and the object almost seemed as if it wanted or was curious, and he said as soon as he got this close-up photo, the whatever this is went away. These are about 25 feet long, estimated by various people who have seen them, 25 feet, with the big wires going from the round front in the, which suggests some sort of electrostatic issue. So here is Chad's photo. And this is what a truck driver sent me on the night of June 17th, 2007. He sent this in email. He was in Shermansdale, Pennsylvania. He was studying the Chad photographs at Earthfiles. And he said, I decided to rotate the drone tail 180 degrees to see if the numbers and symbols would be more clear. He decided that in the middle section, right here, that what he could make out was a plus X, YX7 plus. And he Googled it, and he sent me what he got, saying, Linda, can you understand this? PDS stands for Planetary Data System. And look what's down here, starbase.jpl.nasa.gov. This is a truck driver who turns a photo 180 degrees, writes down and goes to Google and comes up with this and sends it to me. So I Google plus X space YX7 plus, and I start moving a few places, following it, and here I'm into mission name equals deep space program, science experiment, spacecraft name Clementine 1, producer institution name Naval Research Laboratory. And then if you Google deep space program science experiment, there is information about the Clementine 1 lunar mapping mission operated by the Naval Research Lab that launched on January 25th, 1994 from Vandenberg Air Force Base, California as a joint ballistic missile defense organization, the BMDO, associated with the evolution of the Star Wars program from the Reagan administration, and the NASA lunar photographing effort. Now, Clementine photographed the front, back, and poles of the moon, showing the smoother backside. How many of you have seen photographs of all of the backside of our moon? Has anybody? I don't think any of us have ever seen more than one or two. And yet the Clementine mission's goal stated, I interviewed for radio with a tape recorder, Shoemaker, who was the geophysicist who was responsible for putting together the science of Clementine 1. When I asked him, where are the photographs of the backside of the moon, he was very nervous and said at some point, all of their photos would be analyzed and released to the public. And this is 2015, this was 1994. Clementine, here's what we're used to seeing. Here is the one released backside of the moon, which looks almost as if it has been photoshopped clean. And not long after these discoveries, I tried to research more of the Clementine mission resources at the Naval Research Lab or NASA's Lunar Planetary Institute. I did this myself. I worked very hard. Everything that I had been able to go to only a few nights before suddenly was that horrible web warning, pages not found. I experienced this myself. I had been through all of these different webs. I had gotten to a site where I was looking at all kinds of lunar photographs as in their raw state, as if this was for scientists to use on the web. And I remember looking for the backside and not being able to find it. But nevertheless, here were all of what was promised, a NASA mission to photograph every square inch of the moon. Here are all these photos, and then it's gone. Now remember that this research started from studying the symbols on the dragonfly drone tails. When you Google Starbase, JPL, NASA.gov, as I just said, I was taken to various indexes. And what it began that night, I remember when I was able to get as far as I got before they scrubbed it. Could there be a connection between the mysterious flickering in and flickering out dragonfly drones and the 1994 Clementine 1 or other lunar missions and the whole bloody UFO phenomena that is kept from us with policies of denial? Clementine 1 was also scheduled to orbit and photograph this highly unusual Geographos asteroid. Deep Space Network at Goldstone, California in 1994 determined that Geographos is the most elongated object in our solar system. On a 5:1 to 1.8, 5.1 to 1.8 ratio, this is like a very long spindle. It looks almost constructed. This is highly reflective. It's composed of nickel iron mixed with iron and magnesium silicates, according to NASA. But the mission ended when NASA JPL said power suddenly dropped so low that telemetry from Clementine was no longer intelligible. Why that happened, or if it actually really happened, has never been publicly discussed. What is this strange thing, Geographos, out there, with its Greek name again? And bottom line, I've been told by what I think is a reliable insider that the so-called Zeus and Titans were extraterrestrials. They did war with each other, suggested in the previous two speeches, and that is another huge part of our concocted planet. The original Greek gods were extraterrestrials fighting with each other here. The Dragonfly drone mystery deepened with this email on June 26, 2007 from a man describing himself as a scientist and computer software expert who had worked from 1984 to 1987 for a Defense Department-funded lab in Palo Alto, California. Quote, "I'm using the alias Isaac and used to work in what was called the Carrot program in the 1980s. During my time there, I worked with a lot of the technology that is clearly at work in the recent drone strange craft sightings, most notably the language and diagrams seen on the underside of each craft." With his letter, Isaac released several pages from a Carrot Lab document about extraterrestrial technologies that include photos and intricate diagrams and symbols that Isaac explained function as self-activating software for extraterrestrial machines, including anti-gravity invisibility generators and holographic projectors. Isaac said, quote, "I'm very familiar with the language on the undersides of the Dragonfly drones seen clearly in photos by Chad and Rajman, and in other form in the Big Basin photos. One question I can answer for sure is why they're suddenly here. These craft have probably existed in their current form for decades, and I can say for sure that the technology behind them has existed for decades before that. The language, in fact, was the subject of my work in years past. The reason they're suddenly visible, however, is another matter entirely. These craft, assuming they're anything like the hardware I worked with in the 1980s and assuming that they are better, in fact, are equipped with technology that enables invisibility. That invisibility can be controlled both on board the craft and remotely. However, what's important in this case is that this invisibility can also be disrupted by other technology. Think of it like radar jamming, whether it is from China Lake or any of the military facilities stumbling upon the frequency that would reveal the extraterrestrial technology in our skies. Here I've taken one of the black and white extraterrestrial diagrams that Isaac sent, and I made lines to where I could find exact matches on the underside of the Chad photo. It was very difficult. I found that when I took tracing paper on these symbols, these are so subtle, they are so difficult even to copy, that it goes to the heart, and I'm running out of time, I know. I feel like I would like to have another hour, and I can't. This is that look at these diagrams, concentrate on this. These are extraterrestrial diagrams. I wish I could bring the person and everything. These are software, self-activating alien software. That's what you're looking at. These are all mathematically related, and here is what CARET stands for, the program that Isaac came from: Commercial Applications Research for Extraterrestrial Technology. This was their December 1986 fourth quarter research. This is at the Palo Alto CARET laboratory. I received private communication from 2 different men after I had started reporting this, who said, we know about PACL. And one man even said, you can't reveal anything, don't use my email. In Palo Alto, it is a building that looks like a library, and all of PACL is below ground. In the interest of time, I was going to go through some of what is written in this document. It's all detailed at my Earth Files News website. And coming to something that is related to questions that were raised, here is a photograph, according to Isaac, who I was able to communicate with privately from his public document. When this generator is in a certain field, and that is the key. It is also what John Burroughs and I have been talking about in Phenomenon Radio for the last 2.5 months. We've been exposed now, the UK and the US, they refer to it as a unidentified aerial phenomena, non-ionizing radiation that can manipulate human minds and damage human tissues. That field, all of these symbols on these I-beams, everything, they become self-activating software. Imagine that I could pick up this piece of paper. It is embedded with the software diagram that I was showing you. It's built into the fabric. Everything is built in. There are no moving parts. They said these are solid. First, they thought they had solid glass. And the more they worked with it, they realized that they are dealing with programming down to the molecular level, and that it is like you would have substance, the way you can take a hologram and you can keep coming right down to the tiniest part and still be able to project the whole, that all of the substance in which the alien self-activating software works is also constructed the way we would think of a hologram, meaning the tiniest piece still has the infinite software. They don't need the prime intelligence that has done this. This is a technology that could be going through solar systems. Here, it knows how to operate and keep operating, perhaps forever. And the key, right now, these are suspended. They learned that when they put this in a certain frequency, and the scientists working on this, they began to see there were certain orientations. These I-beams would fly into these positions, stay stock still as if they were solid, like titanium in here, but it's air, because of the relationship between the generating self-activating software that is in relationship to these I-beams. And he stressed, this is how they construct their craft. And here is a very similar pattern in a crop formation. This is barley at Windmill Hill. And then there is this extraordinary pattern that was in 2008, Barbary Castle, the astronomer, Mike Reed, worked with me on this one. He discovered that he started here looking at this and looking at this arc, and it hit him as a man who made telescopes his entire life. 25 years he made telescopes, worked with pi out to 6 decimal points every day. Pi is the Greek symbol for the ratio of any circle's circumference to its diameter, and it can go on infinitely, never repeating because it's an irrational number. And this, it was Mike Reed sent this to me in a state of shock. Linda, I started looking at that little dot. I was thinking of it as a decimal point. And he said, I saw that there was a 90-degree arc here in the barley. And it made me think of measurements. And he said, I measured this. I divided this crop formation by 10. And look what happened. Here's the dot and the one where I started. Here is the 90-degree in where it appears to begin. 1, 2, 3. Dot. 1. 90-degree. 1, 2, 3, 4. 90-degree. 1. 90-degree, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can continue doing this. He said, as an astronomer, the idea that there could be pi out to 9 decimal points on a horizontal in barley so precisely just stunned him, and that all of this relates to this is what we were looking at. Look, here's the 90-degree ratchet being used. Here are all of the self-activating symbols. Here is barley. None of us had had any notion of any of this until Mike Reed, a telescope maker, put these two together. Isaac said, but there, the ET technology is different. It really did operate like the magical piece of paper sitting on a table. And that's what I was saying. If you had a piece of paper and it was embedded, I could think it. The paper would go off into the world completely by itself. Go wherever it needed to go, to whoever it needed to go to, get whatever information it was needed. The paper would come back. It could go up floors, it could go across countries, it could go to another solar system. The paper embedded with alien self-activating technology on certain missions could act forever independently. They had something akin to a language that could quite literally execute itself, at least in the presence of a very specific type of field, and that is the part that's still secret. The language is a system of symbols along with geometric forms and patterns that fit together to form diagrams that are themselves functional. Once they are drawn on a suitable surface made of suitable material, and in the presence of a certain type of field, they immediately begin performing the desired tasks, and it really did seem like magic to us. I worked with these symbols more than anything during my time at the Palo Alto Carrot Lab and recognized them the moment I saw them in the Dragonfly drone photos. Word was that the extraterrestrials could design these diagrams as quickly and easily as a human programmer could write a Fortran program. And it is humbling to think that even a network of supercomputers was not able to duplicate what ETs could do in their own heads, close quote. Even this July 17th, 1991 wheat pattern in barley, this is 17 years before, and here is that ratchet. This is the pattern that Gerald Hawkins, the author of Stonehenge Decoded, a British astronomer said had 5 geometry theories that did not exist anywhere on the planet in geometry until this showed up. And we had no idea that 17 years later, an astronomer would be tying this pattern to a ratchet that is found in what a man has provided as alien self-activating software. Could crop formations around the world since at least the 1970s have been functioning as self-activating software, placed each year in some chronological geographical relationship like the carrot diagrams? But in order to do what? It was astronomer and mathematician Gerald Hawkins, author of Stonehenge Decoded, who said, after studying the Barbary Castle and other formations, I find an intellectual profile that is unique and profoundly mathematical. By 1995, German researcher Wolfgang Schindler had made black and white diagrams of all the crop formations he knew about since 1990. He wrote in the spring 1995 edition of the Circular, quote, each pictogram contained at least one element that was not there in another pictogram, and other elements changed their positions from pictogram to pictogram, close quote. Well, Isaac said, what makes it all especially difficult to grasp is that every element of each diagram is dependent on and related to every other element. The ability for a single small symbol to contain, not just represent, tremendous amounts of data is another aspect of this extraterrestrial self-activating software concept, close quote. Dr. Gerald Hawkins and I also talked about a 1992 experience that I had in Wiltshire County, England, in a crop formation where a man that I met told me he had firsthand information that the American Central Intelligence Agency was trying to photograph from satellites every crop formation in chronological sequence so computers could look for mathematical patterns that might be decoded. And then the man startled me, explaining that the CIA's theory was that we are dealing with time travelers, and the crop formations were providing something like a complex monitoring technology to gauge the effectiveness of the time travelers' efforts. But why? He had no answer. As I discussed earlier, U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant Jim Penniston encountered this black glassy craft that had symbols on its surface in Rendlesham Forest on December 26, 1980 at the RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge Air Force Base in Suffolk County, England. Strangely moving aerial lights, beams, and at least one craft interacted with several military personnel over a 72-hour period from midnight December 26th until sunup December 28, 1980. At the time, the joint UK and US RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge was NATO's largest air base in Europe, and there were highly classified tactical nuclear weapons in both sides, Woodbridge and RAF Bentwaters. Sergeant Penniston told me that he did not talk to anyone about reaching out to touch the symbols and receiving a stream of zeros and ones in his mind. He never even told John Burroughs, who was there with him in Rendlesham Forest. But apparently AFOSI and or NSA intelligence agents knew Sergeant Penniston was not telling the whole truth when he was ordered to do hypnosis by chemicals. Wanting to know what happened to him with the UK and US intelligence hypnosis was the main reason that 14 years after the incident, Jim Penniston contacted doctor and hypnotherapist Sharon Grossman to see if he could find out more. Jim worried that the military's drug-induced hypnosis might have been done to deliberately erase or manipulate part of his memory. In these next few excerpts from his September 10th, 1994 hypnosis session with Dr. Grossman, Jim tells the American and British intelligence agents about touching the raised symbols on the craft and getting binary transmission and other information into his mind. And the mission is contact. Do they say contact with what? Us, purpose, research. 4, to help them. To help them with what? themselves. They are time travelers. They are us. You touch the symbols and you set off a program. Yes, the craft was repairing itself. All they wanted was a place to stay while the craft repaired itself. And by touching the symbols, you disrupted the repair program. I activated a binary code. The two government men want to know why. They ask me if I ever had any other encounters with the lights and time travelers before. I haven't. Are they using us something like breeding stock? No, like Band-Aids. Do they ever take fetuses? If it is task, they do. There are different ships for tasking. The government agents know about this. That's why they want to contain the situation. They see you as requiring damage control. Yes, they see me and John Burroughs, and they're worried about Colonel Halt. They know all about us. They're going to give me a warning. They tell me that I will hurt the world. It will breach national security and can destroy the system, cause wars, chaos in the streets. That's why it's important to keep it quiet. But it doesn't make any difference if I talk about the story because it's just too unbelievable, close quote. Taking chromosomes to use as Band-Aids in a far distant future where something is terribly wrong and another civilization is fighting to survive. Are they coming back here because we are them, as Jim Penniston says? Are they coming back to the 20th and the 21st centuries because this was the last time on Earth that healthier DNA was worth harvesting? Is all the genetic material that has been harvested from Earth animals and humans for at least a century providing the Band-Aids? Would humanity today change its self-destructive ways if it knew for a fact that our current DNA was being harvested by self-activating machines in the UFO phenomena to be used to keep a distant version of humanity alive in a future timeline, or another dimension, or even another universe where DNA no longer replicates, or another solar system in this or another galaxy? I think it is likely that intelligent beings from somewhere else in the cosmos have lived on Earth, where long ago they constructed pillars and pyramids, stone circles and ziggurats as machinery. These were machinery, self-activating machinery for energy and communication. And how ironic, as SETI listens to radio signals in space now for evidence of other life in the universe, that the American secret space program has been built with back-engineered extraterrestrial technology. Thank you, and for those who would like to talk to me, I will see you here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to